Howdy all. We have more teams on the non-playoff wall today. So a few more teams have been eliminated. We'll talk about that a little later. Jillian is here, and Ty Anderson will be here in a moment. And everybody else is enjoying Good Friday. Actually, we didn't talk about this, but any plans for Easter Sunday? Because with my family, it's basically any holiday is an excuse to eat. So I get a phone call from my mother, and she's like all proud that she got like a 20-pound ham for like 9 cents with the bonus points from the local supermarket. So it's like and I've been getting phone call after phone call after phone call from my mother and my niece and my brother, like, what are we gonna have? Are we gonna have asparagus? Are we gonna have this? We're gonna have that? It's like it's unbelievable. Everything is focused on the meal. I think that's an Italian thing, Jillian. Oh, well, wait a second. We just, well, hold on.
I'm back.
Okay.
I'm back.
I was getting scared there. I was getting,
no.
wait a second. I can just talk about Easter dinner just so much. But no, what I was saying was, for Easter, like it seems to be an Italian thing that everything is focused on food. Is that, I don't know what your background is genealogically, but what how is Easter celebrated in your family and your circle?
I am Polish and
okay.
So we got an interesting mix, but we throw in some pierogies. That's like a big thing for us. We do some pierogies, make some babka and hushchiki. And hushchiki is like my big thing because it's the little cookies, and essentially all it is fried dough with powdered sugar. But it like people eat it up like it is candy. But well, being Polish too, we treat it kind of like similar to the Italians. It's a lot of food. We like our food too. So.
Yes. And I've had pierogies, and they're amazing. So, it's just I mean, honestly, I basically tell my mother, tell my other relatives, I'm like, I don't care, just I'll show up, and whatever's on the table, I'll eat. But but like certain people don't like, I don't like ham, so I'm gonna bring lamb, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't care. So it's just let's just get together and eat, and then go our separate ways, and based on some of the things, based on the lead up to this, it's like I'm gonna go my separate way about 2 minutes after dinner is done. So essentially, but what I was mentioning before we went live, it's so weird, and I know that it's getting to be a little bit macabre when we discuss this on each webcast. And yesterday we discussed a couple people like Joe Garagiola passing away, and Ken Howard, a character actor that I knew from a show in the 80s. And now, like literally 15 minutes after we got off the webcast yesterday, Gary Shandling, just came up on Twitter. Gary Shandling, who was only 66 years old, didn't have any health problems, and he's dead. It's like this just seems to be like the year of death. It's so weird.
It's like nonstop. It feels like every time on Twitter too. That's where I'm always hearing about it. Every time I go on Twitter, it always seems like somebody else is trending, and it's just kind of crazy how young they are too. That's the other thing, that there's a lot of people with that young age, and it's just kind of sombering, and it kind of is like a reality check a little bit. It's hard. It's I would agree. It's almost like that year of death where every time you turn around, you hear some other tragic news like that.
Yeah, I mean, Ty Anderson, welcome to the show.
Yeah, finally. You know what happened is Google changed the way this whole invitation process works. Now it just shows you your conversation history, not your pending invitations. So I'm sitting there going, I don't have an invitation to this. So it felt like a party that I was not a part of, but.
Yeah, and I'm sending messages. I've sent 4 of them. What the hell?
Yeah, I know. Nice catch, by the way.
Yeah, good save.
Now, let's since we are going to morph into, or since we're talking about death, we may as well talk about the Boston Bruins. But let's do the intro to the show. Ty, you go first, okay?
Oh.
Hello, Hockey World. Today is Friday, March 25th, 2016.
I'm Ty Anderson.
I'm Jillian Fisher.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the HockeyBuzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Eklund will be back on Monday from his long vacation and holiday soiree in Longboat Key, Florida. us underlings will be staying local.
So mad. He's been having nice weather. We had snow earlier this week. Now we have cold rain. Because you're in Boston too, right, Ty?
Oh yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's not. It's not fun at all. I'm done with this.
Yeah, and I made a trip up to Toronto on Wednesday, and after like two weeks of completely clear weather, nothing, no precipitation, nothing. It was basically a rainstorm for an hour and a half going up the QEW, and the QEW is like the Autobahn. Everybody goes about 80 miles an hour, and if you go 55 or 60, you're an old man. So you're taking your life in your hands when it's bad weather on the QEW. Anyway. There were 11 games in the NHL last night, and I think the most important one, the one we'll start with because we have two Boston-based people here, is the Florida Panthers versus the Boston Bruins. The Panthers win 4-1. Ty, I checked in on this game a couple times. I missed the disputed Patrice Bergeron goal, but in looking at the video and then seeing a still picture of it, I don't know how the hell Toronto judged that goal not to be a goal.
Yeah, I mean, this has been the problem since day one. I think everyone now is sort of sick of the. I know this wasn't a challenge, but the review system, the challenge system, there are so many flaws with this. I mean, you look at this. This is different than the Stempniak non-goal against New York on Wednesday night, where you looked at it and you said, okay, I don't see any white between the puck and the goal line, which is always kind of what you need to overturn a call of any sort. This is very clear. I think if you take that logic out the window for 1 second and just see that, listen, the puck cannot physically be, further in than the post without being a goal. So at the same time, though, that same logic applies where you need to have conclusive video evidence from above that shows you that the puck is in. With that play, though, you're not going to get that. So while you understand the call, it's very tough to go, yeah, that's the right call, because it's very clearly a goal. Your logic tells you it's a goal. Your eyes tell you it's a goal. But because there's not one clear replay above the net that shows the puck being in there with no sort of, gray area with the goal line and whatnot, it's not a goal. And it would have been an important goal, too. And I think that's what the Bruins are most upset about today. It's just that was a game. If that goal counts, it's 2-2. The Bruins had momentum. Instead, Florida scores 2 minutes later. They make it a 3-1 game. They add an empty net goal. It's 4-1. That's where their frustration comes in as a team. So while you understand the ruling, it's just this feels like the process is way too complicated. It's just there's too much gray area, and it's starting to hurt a lot of teams, especially at the most important time of the season. You can't have that. So it's just there has to be a fix to this system, in my opinion.
Jillian, I heard some complaints on some of the radio shows this morning about how the league has gone from it all being in the referee's hands to now the constant video review. It's like if a goal is scored, you're waiting 5 or 6 seconds to get the notification from the coach if they want to challenge the offside. It should be something like, if they get the replay and they see it, fine, and if they don't, the puck's going to be dropped one way or the other. It's over officious in a way, and I mean, I think this is a potential disaster and a potential scandalous thing that's going to happen if it costs a team a playoff series or if it costs a team a berth in the playoffs in the next couple weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I get where people are saying they understand the call on the ice, they understand the review process, but it's getting to the point where it's just too much. I mean, one, you don't want the games to continue to get longer and longer. That's a problem, I think. You don't want that process to keep dragging on. But also, the process needs to be a little cleaner, too. There's no reason why that should not be a goal, and I can see it happening in the playoffs or, up to the playoffs where a team essentially is playing for that spot. Mm-hmm. A goal like that, or not even just a goal, but some type of play, maybe an offsides play. There's plenty of rules that we can disagree about, but when it comes to the video replay, there was a goal that was called against the New Jersey Devils. It was a high stick. I think it was the New Jersey Devils. High stick, and it did not look like a high stick. It looked like a goal to me. So there's lots of different parts of this. That's not just did the puck cross the line. There's the high sticking rule. There's offsides. So the process itself is getting to be a little bit too laborious, if you ask me.
And if you're gonna go down the road of using technology, then the technology should be used. And we can a little bit of echo here. The technology that should be used for the goal line is what they use in tennis, and I've said this a few times. There is that I don't know what the name of it. I think it used to be called a Hawkeye, but there's in tennis where you see the shadow of the ball, like it picks up on the contact on the court, and it shows if it hit the line or not. All you have to do is put something around the edge of the puck, and if the puck goes over the goal line completely, then like something that it goes off with the goal judge up in the press box, and then you know it's a goal or not. So I mean, there is technology available, but again, we're going down the road where we're going to have to add more cameras in the crossbar and in the goalpost, and it gets to a point where, Ty, I think it's just being too much, and you maybe just go back to the referee making the call and living with human error.
Yeah, I mean, I talked to a few players last night about it, and the response I got was an overwhelming, well, we don't know anymore. We don't know what this is. We don't know, like, the fix. I had a few guys say maybe more cameras. Someone brought up the fact that in Finland they have the chips in the pucks that can tell you when the puck's in the net. Soccer does this with the ball. Soccer because they want to get rid of this gray area as well, and it's done wonders for them. My idea was, I mean, this is my idea for everything though. It's just putting more cameras in there, putting more cameras in either the pipe or you just have a camera full time in the net that just follows the puck so you can get a better view of it. Because we get these cameras when NBC's in town, but you don't get these cameras every game. And I think that's sort of a problem. Because, listen, it would help. I mean, you always have guys barreling into these cameras and breaking them sometimes, but it would help to have an additional set of eyes in that net somewhere. I don't know if you can put it in the post per se, but just somewhere in that net so you can see, okay, clearly this one goes over the red. This goes over the goal line. This is a goal. Because, like Julian said, you cannot have this happening in the playoffs. It just can't. I mean, this would be sort of the fitting way for this to happen, though, if it does, because given the disaster that this entire process has become, really.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. The camera that has almost lost its meaning now is the camera in the middle of the back of the net. I mean, the goaltender obscures the puck. The goaltender's in front of it. If the puck is over the goal line, the camera in the middle of the net doesn't show you anything. And they have cameras in the posts right now. I think they just put them in recently. So I mean, it would make more sense to have more cameras in the post and in the crossbar so you could see at the level. I mean, there's always this thing, Jillian, about like the angle of whether where the camera is and the optical illusion of whether the puck has gone past. I mean, honestly, I don't care what the optical illusion is. If I see it over the line, it's over the line. I don't think anybody can argue that point. And
I think the big thing, too, is that these are game-changing goals, too. It's not like the Bruins were losing 5-1. It was a close game, and that goal would have made it 2-2, and that could have changed the game. And maybe some people might argue differently, but that kind of stuff, it plays into that game. It makes a huge impact on the game. So when you have a call that goes that way, you need to look at that. You need to look at what can we do to prevent that from happening, because God forbid the Stanley Cup comes around, Stanley Cup Finals around, and how would you like that to see your team lose based on that? And that's a possibility. It really is.
Buffalo Sabres fans know that well. I mean, 1999. I mean, the funny thing was, I have the advantage being in Buffalo of being able to pick up the U.S. TV feed and the Hockey Night in Canada feed. So I was watching. I think I was watching the ESPN feed at that point of the Buffalo-Dallas Game 6, the famous Brett Hull in the crease. And they did not show the replay on Hockey Night in Canada until I think the Conn Smythe Trophy was handed out, or until Mike Modano started skating around with the cup. And at that point, you see Hull in the crease, and then the crap hits the fan. And that's what's going. Now the thing is, that won't happen now, because if there's a disputed goal, there'll be replays almost immediately. But the hubbub, the scandal could be just as much if there's an inconclusive thing that happens and they say goal, and then 5 minutes later you see another angle like you see in the NFL or like you see in other sports, and all of a sudden you see the puck over or the puck not over the goal line or over the goal line. The NHL's got a public relations disaster on its hands, Ty.
Well, no, I was actually just going to say, it's funny, I've heard a lot of people who aren't maybe the biggest hockey fans, like I've seen it in their Twitter feeds or I've heard them talking about it, just because something like this, they look at it too, they're like, that's a goal. Why are we, this is crazy. I can't believe this isn't a goal. So I don't know if you're experiencing that too, Ty, or not.
Yeah, I mean, I liked what Mike said here, where he mentioned the NFL, because I think the system reminds you a lot of the NFL, and while the NFL prints money, I think that allows them to make these mistakes and almost get away with it.
Right.
I don't know if the NHL has that sort of breathing room, where if they make a gigantic mistake, like think about like the Des Bryant non-catch,
Yeah.
you know, and how that played into what the Cowboys, you know, were able to do that season. If the NHL has an equivalent of that, which would be a non-goal or a goal that's clearly not a goal, I mean, that hurts them big time, because they are not one of the big three in terms of sports in this country. Mm-hmm. So it's funny how like this whole system, it's very, you know, you heard it and you go, oh, it's a great idea, and you've watched it and you've watched these referees review plays on a flip phone basically.
Yes.
You know, and it's just like it's mind blowing how only the NHL could do this and find a way to make this actually not as efficient as it would be just by just hearing it and what the idea of the whole thing is.
Yeah. No, going away from just the video review to what's going on with the Bruins right now, Ty, because, I mean, I texted with Eck this morning, and he's gloating right now because he predicted the Bruins to be the team that was going to collapse and that Philadelphia was going to catch them based on their schedule. Well, I looked at the schedule. You know, the Bruins have lost 5 games in a row. This is probably one of the toughest stretches in their season. They played, you know, they went to California. They lost all 3 games in California. They came back. They played the Rangers, and then they lost at MSG, and now they play Florida, who's contending is at the top of the Atlantic Division. If you look at their schedule now, I mean, 5 of the 7 games, 4 of the 7 games are against non-playoff teams. Mm-hmm. At Toronto, at New Jersey, Carolina, and Ottawa. They're at St. Louis, at Chicago, and Detroit. And Detroit is the second last game of the season, and that could be for a playoff spot. I don't get the whiff of panic as I did last year with the Bruins. Am I wrong?
No, I don't think so, because I think this is exactly what you'd expect out of this team. You know, after deadline, they get points in seven games in a row. They handle Chicago, you know, with ease, it seemed, and 5-0-2 out of deadline. Then they lose 5 in a row. So this sort of ties into what this team has been since day one. They are extremely hot and cold. Mm-hmm. The one thing they have going in their favor, I think, versus last year, is that last year Ottawa was the team that was just lighting the world on fire, couldn't be stopped, and based on this new playoff format, Ottawa was able to catch the Bruins in the division. The Flyers cannot catch the Bruins in the Atlantic Division, which is, believe me, the Bruins should be counting their lucky stars right now because of that. So if Philadelphia does bump them, it's going to be in the wild card. So that gives the Bruins a bit of breathing room in the sense that they only have to really worry about Detroit and the other teams in the division around them. Detroit, I think, they beat up on Montreal last night, but they almost blew it. I mean, I think Detroit has just as many flaws as the Boston Bruins. I honestly think Florida has as many flaws as Boston Bruins. Florida, I mean, we saw that game last week where they just sort of melted down against the New York Islanders with 7 minutes left in the third period. So I think that the Atlantic, even Tampa Bay has some issues this year too. The Atlantic as a whole has a ton of problems, I think, with those teams. So, yeah, you look at the Bruins and you say, okay, now you're 5 points away from Florida, so maybe you don't catch them in first place. But if the Islanders lose tonight, and if Detroit continues to sort of be this Jekyll and Hyde team like the Bruins, you have just as great of a chance of hanging on to that third seed, I think, as you do, you know, falling out of it. So I think that there's not as much pressure on the Bruins or feeling them internally. Granted, they didn't make the playoffs last year, so I think that almost helps in a way. It's not like you have a playoff streak on the line. And I do think though that the schedule, as you alluded to, is better. Toronto and Saturday. I know Toronto's playing better. Wins in 6 out of their last 8 or 6 out of the last 10 exactly. You have the Central Division trip, if you will, with St. Louis and Chicago, but Chicago's struggling. New Jersey, they always play New Jersey well. I look at that 4-game stretch and I see St. Louis as the loss because they never win in St. Louis. And I think they could get like an overtime loss, shootout loss in Chicago. So maybe 2-1-1 is your best trip. And listen, that's not a horrible trip this time of year. You just got to get points. And I think that's what it comes back down to. The games in hand thing, that would worry me from the Bruins, though.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at Detroit's schedule. They have a game in hand on Boston. They play at home against Pittsburgh, Buffalo, Montreal, and Minnesota. Montreal and Buffalo are both non-playoff teams, and you saw what they did against Montreal. Although they were lucky to hold on. I mean, they were up 4-0 and almost gave up the lead on that one. Then they finished the season with 3 of 4 on the road at Toronto. It would give Mike Babcock so much pleasure to knock Detroit out of the playoffs. The fulfilling. I mentioned at this speaker series up in Toronto on Wednesday to somebody that I'm sure that Babcock would be thrilled to knock the Red Wings out of the playoffs, and somebody basically said, like Mike Babcock needs one more reason to think that he's like the king of the universe, because he knocked out his former team. But they play at Toronto, Philadelphia at home, at Boston, and at the Rangers. I think that those final 3 games, Philly, at Boston, at the Rangers, are going to be really tough for Detroit. They better hope that they're 3 or 4 points up, because if they're tied, I think they're going to miss the playoffs. But Jillian, the Flyers. I'm getting a Senators whiff here, because they're just. I mean, I watched most of that game, most of the second half of that game, and they were losing 2-1 to Colorado, and Colorado was shorthanded. They were without McKinnon, without Duchesne. And then Radko Gudas scores to tie. I mean, not Bobby Orr, Radko Gudas, and then Giroux scores. I think it was like 16 seconds later, and they get an empty netter. They're just, in spite of injuries, their defense is not the greatest. They just keep winning.
No, they did look really fatigued in the beginning. That first period, they did get outshot by the Avalanche in the beginning. So it wasn't a great start, but I think the Eastern Conference teams in general are having a hard time playing a full 60 minutes of ice hockey. I don't think that's just the Flyers, but it was kind of nice to see them come back like that. It was like they came out of nowhere. I mean, you had the goal from Gudas, who that's not a kind of goal I'm expecting him to score, and then 16 seconds later, Giroux comes out, and a lot of times I feel like this time of year the Flyers do like to show up. They like to beat teams that the Avs maybe don't fall into that category of teams that they shouldn't be beating. That's the team that they can go toe to toe with. But this time of year seems to be a time of year where it's like you never say die with them. And it's funny, if you would have said like maybe about a month ago, 3 weeks ago, if I thought the Flyers were going to be anything of a playoff contender, I would have laughed and said, no, there's no way. Absolutely no way. But their defense is still a problem. I mean, they haven't solved that. And there's always goalie issues with Philly. I mean, Steve Mason has been doing amazing for them, but what happens? You're going to play Steve Mason for the rest of the schedule you have? So I would love to see them make it, but they still have a lot of hockey left.
Well, it's funny because I noticed this with the Bruins tie, and it's similar. I mean, Jonas Gustafsson's a better backup goaltender and more experienced than Anthony Stolarz is with the Flyers. But you had Rask pulled. I think they were down 2-0 in the game against the Rangers, and they pulled them because they wanted to play them in back-to-back nights. And if they thought maybe they thought they were going to lose that game, or they figured, okay, we're behind, so let's give them a rest and let them get ready for the second half of the back-to-back. You've got Mason, who's since Neuwirth has gone down, he's playing every game, and we talked the last couple webcasts about when are the Flyers going to get Stolarz in there. I mean, eventually, and Mason has a history of injury and and fatigue and a few other things. I was at a game in Toronto where he was cramping up and he had to leave the game, and Neuwirth came in. They don't have that luxury now, so I mean that could be a factor for the Flyers. Is how many games can you play Mason before he gets hurt or before he gets tired?
And they did think that he got hurt at one point last night. They did think that there might have been an injury there. Just that is a concerning thing. I mean, there's always seems to be a Philadelphia thing is goaltender controversy. It just never seems to go away. But the good news is that you still have players like Giroux, and they're showing up late in the season, and players like Gudas. I mean, oh my gosh, coming out and scoring a big goal like that. So I think as long as they can keep the offense churning, they can give some breathing room to the goalie, which I think helps that mentality. It helps. It's a mental game a little bit for them, so it definitely helps. It's just still a lot. I'm still a little uneasy. I think they can make the playoffs, but it's still, to me, there's a lot of hockey left.
Now, Ty, with Rask, I mean, the Bruins have 7 games left. I'd be surprised if he doesn't play 6 of the 7.
So yeah, I think they'll give Gustafsson the gimmies, if you will. I think he'll get in against. I think he should get in against Toronto, but Rask plays well against Toronto, so who knows? If the schedule is spaced out well enough, which it appears to be, I can see that being the case. It's a different story with Mason, the Flyers, of course, because there are very few games that you look at and you can say, okay, that's a gimme. Tomorrow in Arizona might be the best one. Beyond that, you have the Jets game. The Jets are kind of shorthanded, as you know. But again, I mean, where do you really fit in? I think with the Flyers, it comes back down to, like Julian said, I mean, Giroux looks great right now.
Yeah.
The one thing that would concern me is that I don't know if you're getting the production you need from a guy like Wayne Simmons right now. He needs to heat up a little bit, I think. Sean Couturier is another guy. He gets an assist last night, but I feel like he hasn't scored the goals that he needs to right now. So that would concern me, I think, more than anything else. I know the Mason, you got to ride till the wheels fall off, and the problem is that the wheels
always
have a history of falling off, so that's
always fall off, consistently fall off.
Yeah. So it's I think there's more concern there than in Boston, whereas the schedule, you look at it, and there are some games Carolina has won. You look at it and you go, all right, you could probably throw Gustafsson here and you'd be okay. I don't know many games in the Flyers schedule that I see, and I go, okay, Mason can take a seat for this one, and that is worrisome, I think, in a way. But when you're playing as well, if you get a little bit more offensively, maybe you don't worry about that as much.
Yeah, Flyers schedule at Arizona, at home to Winnipeg, Washington, and Ottawa. So 2 of the 3 games against non-playoff teams. At Pittsburgh, at Detroit, at home to Toronto and Pittsburgh, and then finishing with that game that was the snow out game against the Islanders on the last Sunday, on April 10th. So it's going to be I mean, we'll have a clearer picture probably, I would say, by the middle of next week when we're down to 5-6 games.
Yeah.
But it's gonna be a really interesting race. Quickly going over to the West. Minnesota defeated Calgary 6-2 yesterday. Colorado, as we discussed, lost to the Flyers. You've got Minnesota now with 83 points. Colorado with a game in hand at 80. But Ty, without McKinnon and Duchesne are supposed to sit out at a minimum another game. But if you're down the stretch and you're sitting guys 2 games with knee injuries, they're clearly not going to be 100% when they get back. I mean, to me, if Minnesota puts a couple more wins together, I think Colorado's done.
Yeah, I mean that would seem to make sense because you can't win without your best players this time of year. It's just I think the league, it's too competitive. I think in terms of even the teams that are out of it, they love to play spoiler. So like at the Leafs, for example, I mean, you got just a bunch of young kids just playing with house money right now, just proving what they can do, I guess. So
yeah, don't start with me, Ty, because we'll talk about this at the end of the show. I'm having fans who are members of quote Tank Nation who are ready to jump off bridges. They're getting really, really pissed off at the Leafs because of what they're doing. Because
yeah.
And it's understandable. You've got young kids who want to carve out a job for next year. You got older veteran journeyman type guys who are trying to stake a claim for a job somewhere or with the Leafs next year. They're all trying. You're not going to tell them to lose, but the organization called up like 7 rookies, and they're all going bat crap crazy, and now they're 6-2 in the last 8 games, and everybody who wanted the Leafs to finish 30th, they're pulling out their hair. So there you go. But anyway, yeah, we'll talk about that a little more in a minute. I wanted to go to this because it was interesting. I didn't even notice this watching the Leaf game last night. I just found out about it this morning when Josh Manson of the Anaheim Ducks was fined. This must be a percentage of his salary because it was the odd amount of $2,486.56. I'll throw in the 56 for you, Josh. He did a throat slashing gesture at Nazem Kadri late in the third period of the game. When the game was tied 5-5, Kadri runs Manson into the boards. It was borderline whether it was a 2 or a 5. He got a 2, and Manson gets up and gives Kadri the throat slash. And ironically, Kadri is the one who a couple months ago, when he got laid out by Mark Giordano, he gave the throat slash. Jillian, I have heard a lot of people say that one of the things that the NHL should maybe loosen up on is not throat slash, because any league is going to fine and penalize people to do that, but that the league, to get more fans, to make it more of enjoyable not a performance but of a presentation, is to encourage their players to be more ebullient, to have celebrations at the end of goals, pump their fist or do whatever, like the NBA and like the NFL and like Major League Baseball does. I don't think that's consistent with the mentality of the NHL. I think it would be forced.
I like that there is not a LeBron James in the NHL. He's great for the NBA, but I don't think it fits with the culture of the NHL. I love after a game, I love when I hear players say, the other team, if they lost, they skated harder, they worked harder, they got the bounces. We weren't fast to the puck. I like that modesty. I think that's something that is unique to the NHL, and that they should kind of keep that in tone with the NHL. I don't know, Ty, if you agree with me on that or not.
Yeah, at the same time, I hate these fines. I do, because I don't think they do really anything. Yeah. I feel like I grew up, I grew up in the end of the era of like the old school hockey, and I grew up with players like Mark Recchi, who, if that happened, if that happened and I asked Recchi about it today, he'd laugh and be like, yeah, well, who cares, so it's so weird to me. I don't know. I know in social media, the age of social media has destroyed everything. Everything is the worst thing that ever happened to any player at that moment in the league's history. I just think so maybe I'm a little bit old school where I see that and I go, that's kind of cool. I think that's kind of cool in a weird way. You remember when Bertuzzi got clocked and he pointed over, I think it was Devin Setaguchi, I think. Yeah. He literally pointed over to him. Bertuzzi's bleeding and he mouths, "You're dead," or he says, "You're next," or something like that. And you're like, oh, that's so badass. This is like an old dude. So.
I like what you're saying. I get what you're saying. Sometimes I think players need to be put in their place, and I think that kind of fits in with what we're saying, where it's you don't like that showmanship, but if you're being a jerk, I almost said different words there, but if you're trying to show off, or I know there was one time at Forsberg when Crosby was diving, he did the diving signal, calling him out, and then when he went to the box, he pointed at Crosby and said, "That goal was on you." I'm fine with that. I think that's not necessarily that arrogance that you see. And I don't mean arrogance in a bad way, but arrogance that you see in the NFL and you see in the NBA. It's different. Well, I think NHL is different in that way, where that to me falls in line with the culture of the NHL.
It's funny because Kadri seems to be the epicenter of all this, because in a game against Calgary in Toronto this past week, he hit Johnny Gaudreau in the corner. Gaudreau and Josh Georges slashed him on the back of the legs, but it wasn't like they took a baseball swing. It was just a tap. But Kadri, who is a known diver, went down like he'd been shot by Oswald from the Texas Schoolbook Depository. And Gaudreau, after the coincidental penalties, I think Toronto got a power play for it, which just encourages Kadri to do it more. Gaudreau was doing the turtle sign, as he was skating to the penalty box, because Kadri turtled. And I mean, there is always a place in the game for like rats, for players who antagonize. You know, Alex Burrows, Brad Marchand to an extent. I mean, Brad Marchand's a very good player, but he's also a rat of the highest order. I just don't want the NHL to do something that's out of the norm, like going back to the day when Ty Domi scores a goal and rides his stick down the ice in celebration. I don't want them to go down that road. I think that, you know, the powder thing that LeBron does, or the Triple H thing in wrestling where he spits the water out. I mean, how it would get to the point of ridiculousness, and I don't think that the NHL wants to go down that road. I don't think a lot of players in the NHL want to go down that road.
I've done that in the press box for every game. Just a bunch of powder, just throw it up in the air. No one wants to sit near me. It's just ruins laptops. No, I agree with that part of it. You know, I don't mind like my favorite celebration was always the Danny Briere fist pump, where he just drops to one knee, just swings his arm around. I'm like, that is cool. I like that. And I don't mind the Ovechkin jumping into the boards when he scores a big goal. If he scores a goal in like a 7-1 game, he does it. I'm like, oh, come on, man, that's stupid. Yeah. But yeah, no, I agree with you in the sense that I don't want the league to become like the NFL or the NBA, where guys have like pre-planned dances when they do something well.
Right.
It's just like, what is that? You know, like, how did you even think of that? Like the NFL, I don't know how these guys do it when they make a sack and they just do this elaborate like 7-step dance. I was like, where do you even think of that? Like, how does that come about? And so I don't think you'll ever hit that point again. But there's nothing wrong with a little celebration. You know, if the context is right and you know it's a big game, you score a game-winning goal, whatever it is, go for it. I mean, that's you know, goal celebrations and threatening celebrations, of course, are different. But overall, I tend to like a little bit of personality with my guys, just because it's better than
personality, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, it's better than like we played hard, got pucks in deep, and got to the net, and you're like, oh god, this again. This is the 19th time this year I've heard this.
At a certain point, though, I do like a little bit of that modesty. Maybe modesty is not the right word, but I just feel like hockey's a little bit different. You know, at the end of a playoff series, as much as they hated each other on the ice, they will shake hands. And there's something special about the NHL in that regards, where they do show respect to the other team, where I feel like you don't see it as much in other sports. So I think as long as they're keeping in line with that, you know, I love the Danny Briere fist pump. I used to love the Yager salute. Like, I thought that was great.
Oh, yeah.
So there is a place for it. It just has to be in good taste, it seems like.
See, now this is the funny. This is definitely a Toronto thing, because I think it was '99 when the Leafs played Pittsburgh in the playoffs, and at that point, Yager was in full salute mode. I mean, after every goal, he would do the salute. And Danny Markov, who was a Russian defenseman who played for the Leafs, when I think it was at the end of the series, they had scored the overtime winner to win the series. Danny Markov, before they did the handshakes, they're all gathered around the glass when I think it was Gary Volk scored the winning goal, and he turns right to Yager, who was skating toward the Pittsburgh bench, who was looking at the Leafs, and Danny Markov does the salute right back to him. That's that kind of stuff. That little gamesmanship. Like apparently Luongo yesterday did sort of taunted Jimmy Hayes a little bit with the catch. He made a save on him, and he caught he sort of did this with his glove and sort of taunted him a little bit. I have no problem with that. I just think the elaborate celebrations, and that it's not in the norm, and I just don't think the players, if some players want to be individuals and do something like that, that's fine. I just don't think that a lot of players really want to do that, but I mean, we'll see.
Yeah. The Hayes one may have come back down to those guys being teammates. You never know.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure. Last thing, and we touched on it a few seconds ago, is like there are two battles going on right now: the battle for the playoffs and the battle for 30th place. And a sizable portion of the Maple Leafs fan base is not pleased right now with their club, even though they love seeing young players like William Nylander and their prospects playing well. The Leafs have won 6 of their last 8 games, and at that point, before this winning streak, they basically said, okay, we're going to at least get a top 5 pick. Now you've got 6 teams within 3 points of last place, and everything is up for grabs. Jillian, what I was telling you before the show, listening to a Buffalo radio show, and there were fans calling up because the Sabres had just sent out a notice about increasing season ticket prices. And the radio host basically said, well, how can they raise ticket prices when the team has finished in 30th place the last 2 years, and they're not in the playoffs this year? But then fans were calling in. They were more upset with the fact that the Sabres were winning games at the end of the season and taking themselves out of position to draft high. Ack and I have battled on this for a while. I don't see a problem with teams that are out of the playoffs positioning themselves to lose at the end of the season and finish as badly as possible. He thinks it's anathema to competitiveness in the NHL. It's not just one market. It's not Buffalo. It's not Toronto. It's a number of teams. Winnipeg, Vancouver. All these teams are bottoming out. I don't see a problem with it.
And I think that's X maybe where he's from showing a little bit. I know being from Philly, people always want you to work hard, play hard. They don't want you to, not skate hard. They don't want you to finish it easy. So I see that side of the argument where people are like, no, we're paying money. You should be out there playing. If I had a job, I'd be expected to show up and play at my full capacity every day. I get that side, but I also understand the other side where there's no reason for you to be trying to win, giving everything you have to win these games when you're completely out of playoff contention. The Devils won last night. They're probably not going to make a run to the playoffs, and they were playing pretty well. They were playing hard. At what level do you say is it worth it to risk maybe injuring one of my star player? If he's got maybe a pulled hamstring, do we try to make him play? No, I don't think you do. I don't know if you agree, Ty, what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I mean, think about these past few years. I mean, you've always seen the Columbus Blue Jackets finish the year on this great run, and it sort of takes them out of a top 5 pick, it seems. And last year, if they had truly been terrible from the deadline on, they could have had McDavid. Instead, they pick around 8 or 9. They get Zach Werenski, which is not a bad pick by any stretch of the imagination. But it's just, you look at it and you say, well, you could have had this, and you have this now instead. I mean, it's just totally different.
Yeah, I mean, I don't get it. I mean, and I've had some, I would say, heated discussions with some Leaf fans who, when I express my opinion about, this is a bad thing for the Leafs to win, they're like, well, the kids have got to learn to win. They could learn to win in the American Hockey League, where the Marlies are going to probably be the leading contender for the Calder Cup, or they could learn to win next year when this team is, I mean, it's going to be a rebuilding process with the Leafs. But you've essentially positioned yourself after 65 or 70 games to be at the bottom of the standings and to go on a run. And you can't tell players not to try. You can't tell players not to succeed. You've got young guys who are fighting for jobs. I understand it. You can't. There's almost nothing you can do. But the whole point was, at the trade deadline, they called up all these young guys, and maybe they shouldn't have called them up all at the same time, or staggered it or whatever. But now you've got a team that's hot, and they've got, I think, 6 or 7 games left to go, and you can basically throw away a complete season where the whole purpose was pain and bottoming out, and now they could draft 8th instead of drafting 1st, 2nd, or 3rd. So it's just, I don't know. It's really bizarre.
Well, once you hit that point at the deadline where you are out of it, I think you should well, first of all, you should do your pre-deadline planning where you trade off anyone that has an ounce of skill in their body, who's a pending free agent or is older, not part of your future. You got to just get rid of all those guys, which is what a lot of teams did. I think the Leafs did a pretty good job of it as well. And then you have to sort of make the weird decision where you put in I don't want to say like a minor league goalie, but you put in the equivalent of a quadruple A goalie, where he's a great AHL goalie, but not really an NHL quality goaltender. The problem is that, like, the guys the Leafs have put in, they have been bad, and it's like that's just sort of it makes the situation that much more difficult, because I think Bernier's at his core, I think he's a solid goaltender.
Yeah.
I've liked what I've seen from Garrett Sparks. I mean, so it makes it a lot more difficult than, say, the Montreal Canadiens, where you know what Ben Scrivens is. You know what Mike Condon is. I mean, those guys, as weird as it sounds, Bernier and Sparks gives you a better chance to win under Mike Babcock than Scrivens and Condon does under Michel Therrien.
Yeah. And just finally, to me, the Bruins better win tomorrow night. I mean, I'm just saying, not from the Leafs perspective, not from the Tank Nation perspective. I'm talking about from the Bruins perspective. 5 games in a row. If they lose, if they get outworked and lose to the Leafs in Toronto, not to say that that's it, but you've got to end that streak.
No, that would be it. You can say it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it would be it, but I'm just saying it's like, I mean,
it's not a good sign. I think worry nation starts to kick in at that point. If you lose in Toronto like that, that's when I would see the worry starting to sink in Boston.
Well, they had this last year when they lost to Florida, when Florida was on death's door and they had ability to bury them and they didn't. And it was like, okay, that's when the worry kicked in. As far as we go right now, they are still somewhat in control of their own fate, and that's really what it comes back down to. Once you take that out of your own hands, then you're screwed.
Right.
And
then you're watching the scoreboard, and I got a message from somebody this morning saying that they were thankful that James Reimer got traded to San Jose because James Reimer led in 5 goals to Edmonton, and Edmonton won last night. So the Leafs being tied with Edmonton in last place lasted exactly 2 hours. But these are people who are single-minded in their focus. They just want this team to finish 30th and have the best chance to draft Austin Matthews, and anything less than that would upset them. So. Well,
it just sucks being in purgatory, if you will. When you're not bad enough to be a lottery team, and you're not good enough to be a playoff team. You're what? You're the Ottawa Senators. Where you're constantly picking between 7 and 15. And listen, you can get a great player in that realm. And don't get me wrong, but it's tough. At a certain point, I think a franchise has to make a decision where they're all in or they're all out. And when you have 1 foot in, 1 foot out, it's very hard to develop a team. I think unless your scouting staff is really top notch, especially in some of these drafts where it's not as deep as last year's was, for example. So, the teams. I like what the Leafs are doing. This was a plan that was in place, it seemed, for a few years, even though it didn't start until this year. It just seems like between the hirings they made and the scouting decisions that they have, and looking at the landscape free agent-wise, college free agent-wise, I think that this was a plan they had in place, and they're executing it well. So teams see that, and they go, do you want all the ping-pong balls to bounce your way, so to speak, when it comes to that plan?
Well, great job, Jillian. Great job, Ty. Want to wish everyone a happy Easter. We will be back on Monday. For Jillian Fisher, for Ty Anderson, this is Michael Agello. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.